Hi, it's Natasha.
And Khalil.
And we are the co-hosts of
WokeNFree.
Thank you for tuning in to our 220th episode of WokeNFree. If you've been tuning in every week for WokeNFree Wednesday, you know that WokeNFree is all about being real and honest with each other and you. We talk about everything and anything important to us, you, the world, and nothing is off the table. This week we are asking the question, do we really need prisons? But before we dive deep, a couple of things to go through. First, have you gone to WokeNFree.com not only to listen to this episode, but to download it through the Podbean app? If you haven't, please do, because that's A, how you show your greatest support, but B, that's how you join the conversation. With that app, you're able to add in your comments and we can talk to you each and every week. Now, for instance, if you cannot download any additional apps on whatever device you catch podcasts on, then make sure that you go to WokeNFree.com, you go on the Listen tab, and then you pick your platform of choice where you're going to follow and subscribe the show on, for instance, iTunes or TuneIn or Stitcher or Google Play, or for instance, our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora. It's a WokeNFree world, guys. So just make your choice and we'll take it from there. Now, of course, you also want to go on WokeNFree.com and click on subscribe to follow the show. When it comes to social media, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn at WokeNFree. And then if you have 90 seconds, which of course you do, it's COVID-19. Get with it, y'all. We would love for you to review the show. So we have tons of, 5-star reviews on iTunes. I think we could get a couple more. What do you think? Again, go to WokeNFree.com, go to the Listen tab, and then review the show on any of the platforms of your choice. And with that, I'm going to kick it to you, Khalil.
Thanks, then. I'll take it, I guess. Before we start the conversation, we'd like to share a little bit about ourselves. This week, we're asking, would you rather spend your time wisely or just live in the moment?
Okay, so for me, I guess I would have to say spend time wisely. I am a Virgo and I'm all about strategy and planning, and the alternative to that just sounds too open-ended and quite frankly a little bit nerve-wracking. So let's plan everything, like literally.
Yeah, I think it's best to spend time wisely, and that allows me to enjoy the moments compared to if you don't just live in the moment, you really don't know what you're going to get. But if you spend it wisely, you can work on working up to those bigger moments, which is a nice thing. So I think it's very purposeful to not live in the moment, but spend your time wisely. But exactly. Speaking of purposes, what is the purpose of the prison system?
Exactly. Great transition, sir. So according to mvorganizing.org, prisons have 4 major purposes. And when I was thinking about this, it reminded me of what I kind of was going through or learned through in law school. But to break it down according to this website, these purposes include retribution, incapacitation, there we go, deterrence, and rehabilitation. And retribution means punishment for crimes against society. Depriving criminals of their freedom is a way of making them pay a debt to society for their crimes. And so ultimately, I would say even with that really drilled down synopsis, I just think it's a system designed to keep people in a pen because we don't know what else to do with them, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with your last sentiment. I think prisons are a way to discard humans and force them into slave-like labor.
Yeah.
And they work for pittance, and it's in some harsh conditions. A lot of times, actually, they're not truly focused on rehabilitation, I think, and that's why they'll release these prisoners, and they're going to be barred from doing many things, so they can't even start a life. So they end up going back in the system. That's the thing with these prisons. They're definitely not trying to get people back into society. Not really. I mean, they put too many things up for being a convict.
Well, see, the problem is it's similar to cancel culture, right? Because it's not just like go to prison and then, okay, you can start your life over. But there's a lot of employers that are opposed to hiring people with certain criminal records. Your background. So it's a kind of thing where if you're going to have a system like this, then you also have to have an aftercare system, meaning that there's going to be a plethora of opportunities where these people would be entitled to work, where they'd be entitled to make more than just basic living, but a decent wage to be able to provide for their household, for their family, and for whatever future endeavors they have. But to just put people in a pen and then be like, oh, well, we don't care what happens to you after, then you're literally setting them up to come back to this pen in the next 6 months, year, and beyond.
Yeah, you take their liberty, like their rights to vote, too.
Yeah, so, and that, too. And then just completely, like to your point, discarding human beings, right? Like, you just strip them of more than just their physical liberty, but their economic liberty, their liberty of spirit and more. It's really disgrace. And so then that begs the question of saying, do we really need prisons?
I think I'd prefer an intermediary where most people are actually treated as individuals, and what would happen is a caseworker would help find out why they committed the crime, and there would be certain violent crimes that I think you'd have to go to the next step and actually go to like a more confined scenario, but most detainees would go through what I think of it as like a rehab facility. Mm-hmm. That's what I think should happen instead of these prisons.
I agree.
Have like a first step thing before that.
Yeah, so I came across this Fast Company article, and just if you are new to the WokeNFree platform, all of our article links are included in the episode on WokeNFree.com. So in this Fast Company article, they mentioned a situation that's been happening, or a really good kind of case study that could be used, which is with Norway, which has followed this path that they've been on since 1968, where they have correctional facilities in Norway focusing on restorative justice and rehabilitation, making sure that the offender can become a functioning member of society again. And Norway has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world, currently 20%, with approximately 3,933 offenders in prison at the time that this article was written, and one of the lowest crime rates in the world. And, you know, then when you look at the United States, there's a 9-year recidivism rate and is a whopping 83%, which meaning that 5 in 6 prisoners are arrested at least once in the 9 years following their release. And prisoners here are held a whole 25% of the global prison population, making the U.S. the most incarcerated country in the world, which is preposterous, because that rate just seems disproportionate to kind of all the wealth countries. And all the amenities that come with living in the United States. So it's mind-boggling, really.
That's insane. We're not even close to 25% of the world population, but
that's incredible.
We hold most of the prisoners. I've heard that number before.
It's crazy. So, okay, so let's break it down. If we were to break down these prison system that we have, and, you know, how would we and what would we replace them with?
You're now listening to WokeNFree.
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 A podcast that gets real and honest.
Well, you go with my suggestion, you go with this rehab facility where everybody gets a caseworker and they'll work with them on why they did what they did, what should they be doing, good their education that they can do, you know, continued learning. Is there employers that they can link up with and maybe do internships? So stuff like this to give them reason to say, oh, I don't need to go and do any of these crimes. So I think you just got to put something in place to give them a reason not to commit the crimes, because there's reason they do the crimes. It's not just random, right? It's not. And if it is a mental health issue, then treat the mental health issue. That's you can do that as well.
Exactly. I would even suggest that this type of institution you're talking about would, in addition to have kind of a really heavy regimented mental health treatment plan, a real personalized, unique career development pathway for every person who came through this facility. Also have a really effective and holistic drug and addiction treatment options and services, because, you know, in addition to mental health services, people are also dealing with substance abuse. I mean, so many people are functioning alcoholics and drug addicts, you know, outside of the prison system. So to suggest or to think that people inside are, you know, they can just deal with it is really ridiculous. And then also just wellness, general wellness, which I know is preposterous because I don't necessarily know if the world outside of prison is too concerned about that. But we, if we as a society are ever going to grow, evolve, and get to 2.0 stage of what the human experience is supposed to be, we've got to find a way to get people to feeling well every single day with mental health involved, but just general wellness. And what does that personalized path look like for you? And then also I would suggest mindset transformation. We've talked about the law of attraction and The Secret and just having a positive attitude. So imagine someone who's, either been in the prison system or is on a life that leads them down to that pathway. There's mindset transformation that's going to be needed to help people think and unlearn the indoctrination that they've received either from the streets or from our actual educational system.
Okay. That's true.
Mm-hmm. And KJ agrees.
Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario? It's scenario time, guys. Scenario number 1. Sri is part of a family that has made lots of money off selling equipment to prisons around the U.S. Do you think reducing the amount of prisons could harm his family's business?
Interesting. I mean, yes, right? Because if his family is in the business of selling equipment that goes in these facilities that we're trying to reduce, then that means that's less equipment. So, but to flip the mindset is, what if some of that equipment could go into another type of facility, like ones that we talked about in this episode, which is kind of a wellness rehabilitation centers. There's going to need equipment as well, whether it's gym equipment, computer equipment, other medical equipment, devices, things like that. So depending upon the equipment that their family sells, they may actually double their income. I mean, so that's kind of the direction I would go with answering that.
All right. And my thing is, this comes down to like most businesses, and it's the reason why there's businesses that succeed and businesses that fail. So as a business, you have to know how to pivot. So they got to figure out, all right, so we can't sell to all these prisons, but maybe we could sell to other agencies around the country. Like, could be law enforcement, could be military, could be some commercial security kind of thing. So I just think they got to know how to pivot. So it might, you could say it could do harm, but if you can't figure out how to sell your stuff otherwise, then I don't know. I think there was something up with the business, because there's a lot of businesses that fall into this trap. They just do something one way and they never pivot, and then they end up closing down. So I don't know if that's not a good excuse to think about, to say that, small businesses are going to be injured by this, but they need to be able to pivot and offer other goods and services. They got to be able to change with the world. So I don't think it's a big thing. Scenario 2. Aries was born in the great state of Kentucky. He thinks that the prison system works just fine because his small town is fairly quiet and has only reported a murder once since the town was founded. Do you think he may have a point since his town is so safe?
So that's a really interesting question. I think this really speaks to like bias and ignorance. And so, you'd have to look at the statistics, right? Between town safety, demographics, and then localities of prisons. And like, is it fair to even suggest that a town that has low crime rates and is fairly safe, do they have, like, what is the relationship and connection to the amount of people in their local prisons? That I don't know offhand. So I would say in and of itself, like, oh, I live in a quiet town and there's not a lot of crime, prisons are great. No, I don't see how you can make that straight deduction. So I would say this person needs to go on an investigative educational journey and kind of break through their own bias and their own ignorance to really understand what they're saying and what they're suggesting, and also look at the greater impact that the prison system has, not just on our society, but also specifically marginalized communities who are disproportionately affected by the prison system in the United States.
Yeah, I think this is a case of just anecdotal evidence kind of thing. Just because you experience one thing, you extrapolate and say everybody experiences this, so this must, and then you're also making these connections where you don't know if that's why it's so safe. It might not be the prison. It might just be you don't have that many people in your town, right?
Yeah.
It could just be that. So there's two things going on here. So I don't think he actually has any ground to stand on. He got to do some research if he really wants to say, oh yeah, these prisons are great. He's just speaking out of nothing. He doesn't have any proof.
Exactly.
It's not enough just to go by your personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Scenario 3. Nafisa had a sweet professor who was able to create the perfect drug called euphoria that he distributed to students on the college campus. When he eventually was caught, he ended up being locked in prison for years. Do you think prison is the right place for people that commit crimes similar to his?
So that would be some type of narcotics charge, right? And that would probably be like a felony, right? And then, but no, I really think that this, again, like we have to get, personally, I guess, being a person of color and a woman, being a part of two communities disproportionately impacted by the prison system, I would say that like my general go-to is not to put people in incarcerated scenarios, but to find a way to address, whatever grievances they've done against society or local communities, but then also understand how they can change their behavior so that they could A, continue to have a livelihood, and B, continue to be a contributing member of our society. So no, they should not just go straight to prison, but we do need to understand why we're trying to drug children or young adults.
The same reason that all the other companies provide the drugs to people too. There's a ton of prescription drugs, and
I know.
There's alcohol, there's cigarettes, there's a ton of things.
I'm just really weirded out by how you phrased it by the sweet professor. Like I'm really
that's what people think because he had the best drug. It's the perfect one.
That's depressing. What's your thoughts here?
My thoughts are that I definitely think this is not the right place. I think that's a ripoff that certain companies can sell as much drugs as they want, and then a person comes along and creates something better, and he goes to prison. Like, to me, that's messed up. Yeah. What should actually happen in this case is FDA should do some tests and see, is this actually a good drug? I mean, what is this thing?
And just how sweet this professor really is.
Yeah, if he's a sweet professor, then they might have something at hand, right?
Sweet, juicy.
Yeah, he might have something. He's handing out to the kids. They've been his test subjects. We can know. Does it work? Does it not?
I'm like low-key getting vibes of like True Blood. And in my mind right now, just thinking of like, is he really just a real life fairy? Like
that's so unfair. You should just think of him as a sweet professor.
I can't. That phrasing is creeping me out right now. It's like really creeping me out.
That's how people are going to think of him.
I, as a former professor, do not ever want to be called that ever. It's going to make me think of this filthy scenario.
Wow, now this became filthy.
Yes. This scenario became filthy.
Oh, man. It shouldn't have been.
Absolutely. But lucky for you, we are at that time again. It is coming to the end of our 220th episode of WokeNFree. Quite the episode discussing, do we really need prisons? Khalil, what should folks do now?
They need to come back next week for the new WokeNFree Wednesday episode. Make sure you follow us on social media to follow along in the conversation. And make sure you tune in next week for WokeNFree Wednesday to join the conversation at WokeNFree.com.
Now, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, definitely be patient with us, y'all. We had like a whole human this year who is always next to us, literally. And with that, we definitely have to make sure that we go through and look at everyone's submissions. But for those interested in coming on the show, definitely, if you are going to be invited, it would be a 2022 selection, but still put in your story on our Contact Us page at WokeNFree.com. That's WokeNFree.com. I mentioned it before. You can always find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn at WokeNFree. And for sponsorships or collaborations, same page, Contact Us page at WokeNFree.com.
If you didn't already subscribe, please do share the episode and make sure you come back to join the conversation every Wednesday for WokeNFree Wednesdays. Remember, WokeNFree is more than a podcast. It is a way of life. Until the next time.